So hi everybody. This is Karsten. Today we miss Jean Gearing. She's unfortunately sick, so you're watching or listening to Lean 42 Live together, just myself and Sönke Clausen. Jean and I, who's normally co-hosting this with me, we're CIO advisors in Europe and North America. And our discussions here are for CIOs, enterprise architects, digital leaders, and really about practitioners that bridge the gap between business strategy and IT execution. We do these as more informal discussions. We connect industry, market trends, and really are also looking for what is likely impacting IT and organizations in the future. And we have special guests like today that help us with suggestions how to overcome those challenges or those impacts and how to best deal with them. So you can also see some recordings in previous sessions. We also do have some upcoming sessions scheduled already on LinkedIn. But today, it's my honor and pleasure to have Sönke with us. Sönke is the CEO of Bee360, which is out of Karlsruhe, Germany, which is my hometown. So very special guest today here. And Sönke, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, my name is Sönke. I studied computer science at Karlsruhe at the KIT. And I had the opportunity very early to get experience in the industry, introducing project management and portfolio management software into large accounts. Yeah, and so I saw the challenge of organizing work and also managing organizations during my very early years. And yeah, I also figured out that software itself can do some benefit, but you always have the change of mindset, which is very important. Different ways of working together, and to focus on a common goal, achievable outcomes, and bring it together in small pieces.
Excellent. So I know, Sönke, you're like talking regularly with the CIOs and digital leaders. Can you give us a little bit of insight on like how those discussions go and like how also your solution Bee360 is coming into play here?
Yeah, sure. So very often digital leaders have the same struggle. There's a lot of complexity going around. A lot of technologies are hitting the IT departments, but also all business areas. And for sure, there's much more pressure for innovation than you have capacity or funding to innovate. And if you do not concentrate on the right topics and do not focus, it's always the issue that you get distracted and you do not get the results in time. So I think one of the major challenge these days is find the right focus and also get a consensus within the organization, an agreement what to do next. And I think this is very challenging because, as always, it depends a little bit how much you can deliver with your capacities, but also the clearance of your roadmaps. And to adjust it and bring it together, it's a big challenge for all organizations these days.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of kind of like those challenges, I think that's something that we also experience with our consulting engagements, that there is kind of like a lot of change, a lot of like new things coming in, but also we've seen a lot of like big transformations also coming to organizations. So what's your take on kind of like those big transformations and some of the nitty-gritty day-to-day business?
Yeah, I think the big challenge is typically the day-to-day work has to be somehow delivered to keep the business up and running. So you have always the small inputs which comes from security, from patching, from update work, from integrating new suppliers, new dealers, whatever. Yeah. So it's day-to-day work, and typically, as we have a very, typically a very tough situation in terms of war for talent, your IT department is pretty busy with keeping the day-to-day stuff up and running. And then on top, you want to transform, you want to accelerate, you want to transform your business. And typically it means additional capacities, additional funding. And yeah, and for sure, as always, we have a lack of experts. If you cannot have a right priority, and if you do not do the right responsibilities, it mix things up. And very often, the organization are almost paralyzed because they have too many things to do simultaneously. And it's very hard then to get achievable results and also in a timely basis. Yeah. And most of the clients I work with, the transformations go much longer than expected, yeah, unfortunately. And yeah, it's very often also a lack of transparency.
So is kind of like the tooling that you mentioned, is that kind of like helping with kind of like that balance of kind of like the big transformation with the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you have a, let's say, agreement with your board, what you need to achieve your day-to-day business. And if you have agreement that you need to keep the systems up and running, to provide the expected services, yeah, then the question is a little bit, how much do I want to invest in additional demand, in additional transformation? And that makes it also easy, typically, for tech organizations to justify additional budgets. Because also in these times of economy, sometimes the budgets are pretty tough. Yeah? And you have to argue, you should reduce IT costs. But if you want to transform, it's very hard doing it while reducing cost. So you somehow have to explain and make it pretty crisp why you need additional investment to do the transformation and what happens if you do not do the transformation in time. And I think very important is find the right bottleneck and also to enable your business peers to help you to overcome the bottleneck.
I think it's that's a very important part with the transparency and like you as a digital leader like document what you need or where the bottlenecks are or what's kind of like you give kind of like hard fact-based insights into where things are that then enable a more grounded decision making and a more holistic decision making as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And very often it's also, if you use the enterprise architecture in the right way, it's a great directory because this directory helps you to assign the transformation needs, to assign also the, let's say, the requested process variances you need or additional integrations you need. And having this catalog, this organization structure helps you to formalize the right portions for the change, because it's a bad idea to have too many changes in different areas at the same time. Yeah, and so having this agreement, where sometimes also logistics need to understand why the focus is marketing first, and it's not logistic and marketing together, because it just not work out if you have the scarce resources and not the possibility to spend more. And having this in, let's say, in a clear picture, in a digital twin in your organization to see how you want to transform from which state of the organization to the next state and what also needs to be implied for it. And for sure, in these days, it's a very good idea to do it more iterative, more agile, not this big 3 years transformation projects. It's better to have this step-by-step transformations, which are manageable, which are under control.
But so you mentioned also kind of like the agreement or the consensus and kind of like between different departments, different leaders. How much is kind of like do you experience also in your discussions with the CIOs or the digital leaders? How much is it kind of like a people person kind of like problem that you need to tackle with a more kind of like soft skill approach, and how much is it kind of like a I miss the hard facts and I miss kind of like integration between, you mentioned enterprise architecture, project portfolio, you mentioned like people, like different parts of your organization that give you kind of like the hard facts for some of the decision making?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. It's kind of both. I think very often, let's say, classical technology functions tend to be a little bit away from the business and more focused on tech, while they should be more focused on the capability, on the business capability, on the business process, and they should be on eye level with the business folks to have the right architecture, the right solution blueprints, and they should really understand the business. And so I'm kind of, let's say, shocked if I very often see classical IT designs where you see there's one organization which is responsible for applications, while another is responsible for operations. Yeah, this is kind of way where you see it's not about applications. It's about bringing the right domains, end-to-end processes together. Yeah, and so if you organize in a way IT provides applications, you see it's not too much with the end-to-end thinking.
Mm, mm. If we I like kind of like the balanced approach, and I think it's valid that you need both to kind of like work with people, but also with having good data and good resources to make arguments. Before I come to my next question or here, and we discuss this further, just a reminder for all the people that are currently online that do not see that as a rerun or on demand, feel free to ask questions on the LinkedIn Live chat, and we hope to cover them then here. But before we come to those, what is kind of like what data sources do you feel need to be integrated for a leader to really give the best insights? Is there somewhere you say, okay, that's the nucleus of things? I always need a list of projects, a list of applications, or is it other things that you think is kind of like the core part?
This is a very good question. So I think for sure, if you're not aware of your financial situation as a digital leader, you have a big issue. You're spending 50 million and have no idea for what, it's pretty tough. So the financial transparency has to be pretty clear. You should know about your run, you should know about your growth, your transform, you should know about the budgets of your initiatives, yeah, and not just one time. It should be kind of a rolling financial planning. And for sure, as most of the organizations tend to have a lot of labor within IT, you should also be aware of the capacities, because it's a major part of the cost. And if you're not aware of what your staff actually doing, if they're doing more projects, more initiatives, more innovative stuff or more operative stuff, it's very hard also to do the right sourcing in the future. And being aware of what are your strategic capabilities, what are the capabilities you have to own, because you want to be differentiating and you do not want to be dependent on different vendors. So this is also a key asset. And for sure, talking about enterprise architecture, you should know what you're actually having as a legacy and where you're aiming to. Yeah? So you should be aware of your applications. You should be aware of your strategic capabilities, because very often it's linked together. Thinking of the strategic capabilities you typically want to own, while commodities, you think probably that the commodity process is also good enough for you because you're not differentiating about it. Yeah. And for sure, you should be pretty aware of how you handle demand in a timely basis, in expectation with your business that shadow does not grow too fast. Because if you do not deliver, typically business do not say, I do not have the demand. They typically just solve it some different way. Yeah. And so I think it's a good idea to have a balanced approach. If you do not have the capacities, that they at least are in a space which is in good sake with IT together to provide a solution which is also secure enough for the next years to come.
I think I sometimes think it's like if we look at the financials, it's sometimes not as well managed as we all wish, but it's also reflecting the same way and kind of like I like the connection that you made between kind of like the financials and also the enterprise architecture, because your financial you separated into run the business, change the business, like potentially transform. And of course, you have it on the enterprise architecture side as well, where you have kind of like what's your current state is. So that's kind of like your run, but also where do you want to go and what's that gap? Like, how do you get there? And is that reflected also or linked to those change the business costs? And is there an alignment of things where you going probably back to kind of like the consent that you had in the beginning? Do we all agree that we want to spend in these areas? And then does that reflect where really the money is flowing? I've seen like a lot of organizations where they had a strategic plan of what capabilities they want to, like what applications they want to invest in, but then their funding actually was very different because then kind of like your day-to-day politics played in, and kind of like decision making was not aligned to, is it really what we want to fund? More on, nobody said no in the boardroom to that big project from person X, and everybody like agreed sort of to it, so it like went through, and the money went into a direction that you strategically don't want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a very good question where you build the consensus. I think it's very easy in talking about application rationalization to find a consensus among the architects. They say, all right, this technology is much secure, much better, cloud operator or whatever. But if it's not in consensus with the business and with the business process heads, it's hard, because if you cannot agree on corporate processes at one degree, you would have a very hard job on rationalization of applications. Because if you can choose your project by country, by region, by business area, it's almost impossible to find the one solution which fits for all the processes. And so I think this is always a little bit the question, how much process governance an organization can apply worldwide, in which areas, and where does it make sense to apply it, while where doesn't make sense to apply it, because it's your competitive advantage to be different by country. And so this is also one thing I don't like too much in the idea of application rationalization. It sounds good. It sounds so easy. Everyone wants to have it. But if you're not doing it together with the process owners, it's pretty challenging. It's on one side, it's pretty clear that you need it, but on the other side, how do we build a consensus to get it? Because rationalization always means typically not it's an application I do not need, I do not use at all. It's some are using it while others are using another one. And how do I shift them over? I shift them typically over if a business owner says, we do this process in that tool, stop.
Excellent. I like how you brought in kind of like the concept of differentiating by countries or business areas, or so it's something where I think we also do have, like in the industry, the concept of like first I think it was called like bimodal. I think we're now in like a more multimodal approach in many organizations. What's kind of like your take on those like multimodal IT setups, and how do you see a more structured approach to general management of the capacity can help even with that?
Yeah, I think pretty good is if you think about, let's say, having different processes in different regions, you typically will have demands changing these processes. And so the question is about the governance structure to think about, are they really beneficial to do these changes? And it's kind of a business governance to think, do I really need this variance? And what is the benefit of it? And having a discussion on this is, again, consensus. Talking about a right key user structure who can discuss, does it also help for different countries? Then it's great to have this enhancement. While if it's just isolated, yeah, sure, you should have a local business case that you justify this adoption. But if you say it's beneficial, then it's a great idea to roll it out to all countries. And then again, you're kind of standardized. And we think also having in here a transparent process of what's going on in which areas and which capabilities, where you also may have a voting capability, where you say, for Spain, it's the most important topic, while for Texas, this topic doesn't make sense at all. We need something completely different. It's great because then you see a little bit, if you do not agree on different regions or countries with the same functionality, it's a good idea to have a flexible platform approach where you say on a technical operational level, it's standardized, while on the process level, it's great to have it local adoptions. And then you also have to organize for it. That means that you can have this local adoptions very fast, at least strengthen the platform. While you can say it's a global process, it fits for all, it's important that you train and educate and explain why it's important that everyone follows the same process.
Wow. No, this is great, Sönke. I really love it. Just a short breakout here and make everybody aware. Today's recordings are available on our Lean 42 Academy. You can join it for free. All those recordings from our LinkedIn Live plus many webinars are available there for free. We also do have like some paid courses there, but we really want to build a bigger capacity and knowledge for digital leaders, and that's why we have a lot of content there for free. So coming back to the topic of kind of like building like an ERP system for IT, or building something that kind of like helps leaders to kind of like manage their capacity. What is kind of like a difference that you have seen with different organizational sizes, or also like between Europe versus the US? I know you've been also a lot over the pond, so to say, in the US. So is there something where you see kind of like differences, or is it like, do the commonalities with like struggles in the same area dominate more?
I think some of the issues are similar. That means you have this issue that a lot of pressure is on the technology side of the companies. You want to change fast, you have to transform quite a lot, and you have this endless influences of new technologies. And you somehow have to organize it. That means getting the right responsibilities for technologies, for the applications, and also understand what financial resources I need to operate it in the right way, and also what resources I actually need to operate it, but also to change it, is really key. And so that's also why we think that the portfolio techniques, strategic portfolio management, but also enterprise HR planning, has to closely link into enterprise architecture, and also closely has to link into IT financial management. Because you always have to understand, what does my architecture actually cost to operate? And if I transform it, what will it cost me to operate? But also, what will it cost me to transform? And how fast can I transform? And the important thing is, again, the transformation is not just we press pause and do transformation for years. Unfortunately, we have to keep up with the business, with all the challenges, with all the integrations, with all the day-to-day jobs, with all the in-flight small projects. For compliance reason or whatever, we cannot just refuse. And so it's kind of a transformation and an open heart. You have to, it has to keep working, while you change. And I also am pretty sure it is not just the one transformation. We go more and more in a direction where we continuously have to transform, where you have to get the resilience in the organization. And that means if we know what we're actually doing, what the focus is, what the strategies is, how to bring it together, the goal structure to your work structure, how it fits into your enterprise architecture, it's very easy to understand why we're heading in a direction, and also what happens if we change direction. And this is almost impossible if you have this approach of isolated expert tools, because then everyone has this home turf and says, in my roadmap, this is not part of the roadmap, while the business strategy says it's a little different things. You're always aligning with different plans, and that's almost impossible. So you have to find a model which is tightly integrated, and this solution blueprint, in fact, is what we call the B Core approach, which is the base of Bee360.
Very good. Is it something where you can give kind of like leaders some advice on where to start or how to kind of like go down that path, or any kind of like best practices?
Yeah, we think it's pretty much about principles. We think transparency is a great principle. And this is something which is hard for some organizations. Because if we had some bad decisions, for example, every sales rep in the region bought his own tool, yeah, it might look awful, yeah, because you have too many tools. But it's a good idea to know about it. And it's also a good idea to have it on a level which is decision relevant. Because very often tech guys tend to collect very detailed information, but they cannot keep it up to date. And if it's not up to date, it's just a burden. Then data is no benefit at all. So having then the correct data on the right level, with the right responsibilities, keep the data up to date, and enables you to drive decisions based on data. And these principles you can apply almost on every practice. It can be applied on the resource management practice, where you would have the question, at which degree can I keep my capacities up to date? Can I keep it up to date on a task level? Probably not. It's a very hard job. Can I do it on a work package level? It's probably also a hard job. So what is the level where you can plan capacities on a rolling basis that you can drive decisions and which helps you in aligning new topics? How can you decide if you can start a new topic? Do you have the capacities to do so? Because if you have the capacity, because if you have the capacity to start something, yeah, then the project manager or the agile team lead will have enough, let's say, degrees of freedom to do, let's say, the sequencing of the tasks. But you have the need to have the capacity to start the whole bunch of work.
Yeah, I think. Sorry to interrupt earlier, but I think very often the new things are taken on, and kind of like the impact, or that there is kind of like then other things that will be delayed or not be worked on is kind of like neglected or diminished or something like that, because there is the like a lot of people I met in IT are kind of like are wanting to please, are wanting to kind of like help the business, help their areas, and they kind of like are willing to say yes, and kind of like it's something where they then struggle and want to be like a superhero and still get it all done. But of course, that's not like, at least not sustainable. It like very often like works in like a short run, but for long term it does not. So I totally see how better transparency and also honesty on what you can take on and what needs to give or what needs to be stopped if you take something new on, or what like maybe stretches some of the other implementations on a longer time scale, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and especially very often organizations also tend to evaluate much more demand than they can actually deliver. And if you, for example, think your workday has 8 hours, and if you would spend 6 hours on evaluating what you can do in your workday and only have 2 hours of work time, it's probably a bad choice, because you evaluated just too long. Yeah, and so finding the right balance to say, yeah, it's nice, I want to conversate with business very often, but not all the time. It might be once within a month or once within a quarter, but not all the time. You cannot throw over new things over and over doing estimates, because unfortunately, IT guys tend to estimate very deeply. And so if it's not implemented, it's again a waste of time. And so balancing it to have the right, let's say, amount of preparation of work, then execution of work, and having it balanced with the capacities, it's really key.
Great. Thank you so much, Sönke. Just a reminder, if you want to have more insights or learn more about it, there are events throughout Europe, but I think also in the US, where you can meet Sönke. They are on b360.com/events. There's a couple of like digital leaders afterworks and other event formats there where you can like learn more, discuss more, get to know Sönke and his team. So that's just a plug there. If you want to kind of like because we're coming at the end of our half hour of LinkedIn Live here. Sönke, any final words from your side? Anything you want like leaders to be aware of?
Stay focused.
And how do I stay focused? How do I get my focus?
Yeah, I think start finishing, stop starting.
Okay. Alrighty. So then we all hope you took something away from today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening in or watching us live or as a recording. Thanks so much, Sönke, for your time today, and hope to see you all around.
All right. See you soon.
Take
Thank you,
care. Bye
Karsten.
bye.
Bye bye.
Sure.